everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Evie Lupine and today I have another video for you all. Today I wanted to talk about power imbalances that can happen in the world of BDSM. Now my intent with this video is not to fearmonger, is not to make anybody afraid, and it's not to create barriers where I'm saying that you can never play with a person like this or you should avoid this type of person at all costs. That's not my intent. My intent is to create awareness about some things that can potentially result in subconscious or unconscious choices in how you choose to interact with the person, i.e., typically, it's going to be a situation where you may have more difficulty setting limits or telling somebody about your boundaries or using a safe word or advocating for yourself during a negotiation based on somebody having more power than you or seeing somebody as having more power than you. It is not necessarily about predators going out there like exploiting people or looking for people that kind of fit the lower side of this power differential that happens, but just being aware, even as the person who may see themselves as being on the lower end of a power spectrum subconsciously, how that impacts how you might negotiate, interact with somebody in BDSM. Again, nothing I'm saying here is necessarily a, red flag, do not go, do not interact with this person. It is yellow caution signs. It is saying, hey, think about this, think critically. Is there anything going on here that might be impacting your ability to advocate for yourself and for your own best interests? So please just keep that in mind when I am talking about all of these different subjects. Now, the first one that I want to discuss is probably going to be the most obvious, and that one is age. Age is a big deal, and I think it's the one that's going to be the most obvious to people because it's something that we deal with even in the vanilla world. There are even like weird calculations that people do to try and determine like an appropriate age range for people you're allowed to date based on how old you are, and that is not really something that I think is super helpful. I don't think that that really has any merit whatsoever necessarily, but it is important to consider how an age difference might impact how we interact with somebody else. I think this really has to do with a lot of socialization that we have when we're kids when it comes to respecting our parents, respecting our elders, listening to our older siblings and our teachers and our aunts and our uncles, basically anybody who was older than us when we were a kid. We were supposed to look up to them, we went to them for answers, they were supposed to know everything, they were wiser and more experienced, and I think that kind of framework doesn't necessarily leave us when we turn 18. It's obviously not as prevalent, and most of us don't think that our parents have the answers for everything anymore when we're 18. But again, that socialization, that mindset kind of continues subconsciously throughout a lot of the interactions that you'll have. And so if you're somebody who has just turned 18 and you're interacting with somebody who's 40, they may not be predatory, they may not specifically be looking for an 18-year-old. For some reason, you are compatible, you like the same things, you're interested in the same kind of play. You have to be just aware that just because somebody is older than you does not necessarily mean that they have all the answers, especially when it comes to BDSM. There are a lot of people who don't start doing BDSM until they're in their 40s. So being older does not necessarily convey expertise or experience or any more knowledge than you might have. So when you are negotiating or talking to somebody who is older than you, do all the same safety steps, do all the same vetting that you would do for somebody who is the same age as you or somebody who's even younger. So basically what I'm trying to say here is you can have somebody who is 25 years old who has 6 years of experience in the BDSM scene. You can have somebody who is 40 and has 0 years of experience in the BDSM scene. So just be aware and don't make assumptions on how much you need to check somebody's credentials purely based on their age alone, because you can start doing BDSM at any point in time in your life. And I think more importantly than just numerical age, it's really important to evaluate somebody's maturity level, because that can be drastically different between age groups and age ranges. I have literally met people who are in their 30s and 40s that still act like they're 16, and not because they're age players, because they never had the emotional maturity to actually kind of leave that teenager mindset. And I know people who are in their early 20s who, because they had to grow up very quickly when they were teenagers, they had to have a job and take care of the house and take care of their younger siblings, they have a much sturdier head on their shoulders than a lot of people I know that are in their 30s. So again, just don't stereotype about age. It is really more about compatibility and just doing the same good research you would do on people the same age as you and people who are younger than you. In that same vein, I also want to talk about experience being a way that impacts us subconsciously when it comes to interacting with people in BDSM. This especially doubly goes for people who are known educators in the community, because people love to get up on stage, love to talk about BDSM and share their knowledge and their expertise, and it is really, really easy to look at that and make decisions based on the fact that you know they're presenters or they're authors or they're YouTubers and just think that they have all the answers about everything and that you should just go with whatever they say. Again, subconsciously you may be thinking that because you're thinking, oh, well, they're so experienced and they're so good at BDSM that they are presenters. And let me tell you, I have known in my time a few presenters who gave an okay presentation but knew how to talk the talk more than they knew how to walk the walk. So just because somebody is a public figure, just because somebody is a pillar in your local community, doesn't really mean necessarily that they are super great at what they do or even the best at what they do, or again, are compatible with you for what you want for a scene. So don't let somebody who is, say, the owner of a local dungeon, the organizer of a local munch, somebody who's a DM, it doesn't even have to be like a high level of community experience that impacts this, but just be aware, just because somebody chooses to volunteer a lot or they run a local dungeon doesn't necessarily mean that they are any better at doing BDSM than anybody else is. Maybe they just have a proclivity for public speaking. Maybe they're really good at giving presentations or they love writing. Doesn't necessarily mean they are any better at it than the people who are taking classes for them. So don't assume anything based on somebody having a reputation for experience. And again, I think this also goes into somebody who is really known for doing a certain type of play. Somebody who is known as being the fire play top, the needle play top, somebody who develops a reputation for doing a particular type of scene sometimes has their reputation precede them. And even if somebody is, again, really, really good at what they do, don't let that be something where they tell you how a scene should go. If somebody is, say, a fire play top and they think that starting out with, say, 20 cups is a good way to start for a fire cupping scene when you've never done it before, if you really do just think that 5 or 1 is a good way for you to be able to experience it, don't let somebody else, based on what they think, especially if they're on the opposite side of the slash from you, tell you what is going to be good for your own experience or your own enjoyment. You really, really have to be your own self-advocate in this. And then if you're not compatible or you really just don't agree on that point, don't play with that person. They are not the only fish in the sea. There are plenty of people who have a lot of skill sets, who have a lot of things in common with you, who won't try to tell you how you should experience or how you should do an introduction BDSM scene based on what they say is a good idea. Now, I do think with this, it is important to kind of keep like tone and context in mind. If you don't know what something is like at all and you go up to somebody and you say, hey, what do you think I should do if I'm looking to experience a flogging scene? And they say, oh, well, normally it's good to start with something like a deer flogger for, 5 to 10 minutes. That is good advice, and they're not trying to necessarily impose their will on you. They're simply giving you advice, and they are allowing you to take that information as you will. if you were in that same situation and you were negotiating for a scene and you countered with, well, gee, 10 minutes seems like a long time. What if we just did it for 2 minutes instead? A good thing to do would be if somebody responded with, okay, yeah, we can go ahead and try it for 2 minutes. And then if you decide you want to try it for longer another time, we can do that then. Bad person would do something like, no, I really think you should do it for 10 minutes first. Are you sure you don't want to do it for 10 minutes? Negotiation is not about somebody trying to coerce you into going over to their side. It's about respecting the offers and the counter offers that people are making to each other. And so if you, as the bottom, as the person who's experiencing this, is having somebody tell you how you should do a scene, and don't necessarily give in to that kind of behavior simply because somebody has a lot of experience in one particular field. I have already touched on things like social status when it comes to talking about things like presenters and community organizers, so I think I'm just going to leave my thoughts there for now. What I want to get into that I haven't talked to about yet is people that you rely on for your physical or your basic needs. So maybe it's somebody who pays for your groceries or your gas bill. If you live with your dominant and you're not the owner of the home or you don't contribute to rent. Basically anything where somebody has a say or contribute significantly to your basic physical and like mental needs is something to be aware of when it comes to negotiation. Because oftentimes when you are in a situation where you're negotiating with somebody and you like subconsciously are aware of the fact that like they are responsible for the roof over your head, it can sometimes be hard to say no because we don't want to disappoint or hurt the people who have power over us, that we are in relationships with, that we love. And so that will sometimes cause us to make decisions that are contrary to our own best interests. So let's say that you are in a position where you are negotiating for your dominant and they really, really want to do a figging scene. And you're like, I don't really know if I like figging. The idea of like ginger anywhere around me is just not something that I really want to do. If you are in the situation where you are just like negotiating with a pure equal, you will probably fall on the side of like saying no to that figging scene. Whereas if you're in a situation where somebody, you know, is about to pay for your car insurance bill, or is responsible for keeping a roof over your head, or somebody that you're in a really intense and power exchange relationship with, because I'm kind of like combining the like has a lot of sway over your physical needs with also being in a power exchange relationship, because those two things very commonly go together. You will probably be more likely to go on the side of like, well, I guess I don't want to upset them because that might kind of hurt my ability to have my physical needs met. So I guess I'll just go along with it. I'm not saying this is common. I'm not saying this is like a manipulation tactic on the other party's part. It's literally just that like subconsciously your brain is thinking about, oh my God, what if we upset this person and then we're not able to get like food, water, and shelter? Maslow's hierarchy. And like your brain's gonna freak out a little bit at the idea of like upsetting somebody who is responsible for your needs. And in general, I think it is like unhealthy to like view doing BDSM scenes as like something you have to do with another person or something that you owe to somebody else, which I think is really where this mindset comes from, is like, oh no, I owe this person BDSM scenes of XYZ type because they provided for me in this way. And so really the best way to kind of combat this mindset of, you know, owing somebody because they did something for you or because they take care of you in one way is to either ease the burden by giving back to them in another way that's not related to a BDSM scene. Like, hey, yeah, maybe they pay for the car insurance bill, but you make sure all the cars are clean and you take out the trash and you do all the other household chores. So your brain is kind of already going, I've paid that person back for the thing that they've done to me. Or just sitting down and having like good long talks with your partner about like, hey, I want to check in about how our relationship is going. You know, sometimes I feel like when we're negotiating for scenes because of how our power exchange relationship is set up. And I'm really grateful that you take care of me and provide for me. I'm just a little bit worried that the way that we negotiate now might be impacted because of the way that, you know, you're able to provide for me physically. And you can kind of like open up that dialogue, open up that conversation, and then they can be aware as well that this is something that you're thinking about, something that's on your head. And then they can also check in as well when you're doing scenes and just be like, okay, you really want to do this, right? This isn't because you feel like you owe me for getting groceries last week or anything like that. And that way you can kind of have that back and forth and that awareness, and hopefully that'll be something that is relatively easily mitigated. Now, there are a lot of potential reasons out there why there might be a power imbalance that gets created within a BDSM relationship and when you are negotiating. Even things like non-verbal communication can be such big deals, or like somebody's physical presence can even be a really big deal to somebody. Like if you're like me and you're like a really like physically small, demure submissive, and you're like sitting on a small chair like in the corner of a dungeon, and somebody like comes up to you and they're like 6'5" and they're like super muscular and they are putting their body in like a really like blocked off position where they're like cornering you in and they're like leaning down and they're like, hey, do you want to do a scene together? That is not like a good negotiation situation for your brain. And I may make a whole other video where I talk about like nonverbal cues like that, but it is really important to be aware, especially if you're dominant, you're a large-bodied person, how you are holding yourself when it comes to when you're negotiating. Are you like visually on the same level as each other? Are you both sitting down? Are you both standing? Is your body language aggressive? What is the tone of your voice like? You know, what is your, eyes doing? What are your eyebrows doing? All those little tiny things, our minds like take all this information in, and from that create a picture of what we perceive the other person's emotional state to be and like how much of a threat they are. And the more you see somebody as like aggressive or a threat or like dominating you, the more likely you are to acquiesce subconsciously to certain demands or kind of just sway your decision-making potential. Because if you are in a situation where you and the other person are sitting in such a way where it's communicating, being in an equal sort of stance with each other, or you sort of are like, okay, they see me as an equal, that allows you more opportunity to be able to advocate for yourself. Whereas if somebody is being really overbearing or presenting as really aggressive or is trying to kind of use their body in a certain way that makes you feel uncomfortable, that may impact how you decide to answer certain questions or set up how certain things go in the scene, and kind of maybe acquiesce a little bit more than you normally would to their preference rather than to your own. Luckily, again, that is really easy to correct as long as you are aware kind of what you are doing with your body language and what the other person involved is doing with their body language. Now, I just want to wrap this video up by emphasizing that these are not necessarily things that are like full stop, don't go any farther, never play with this kind of person type stuff. These are just generally things to be aware of, to be conscious of, so you can be a critical thinker when it comes to how you play with BDSM, because there are so many things that can impact how a scene goes and what you choose to do with somebody. And the more that you can be conscious about that process, the more that you can be aware of that process, the better it is ultimately going to be, and the more information that you can give to your partner about what you honestly really want from a scene and how honestly you want to have that relationship. Anyways, if you guys have any questions for me, please let me know. You can leave a comment down below. If you like this video, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week. And if you like my channel, please check out my Patreon. That is what makes videos like this possible. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.